had a very, let's say, a longer interview for Freelance Business Month last year, and I'm going to drop the link to that discussion as well, because it was full of insights, mega interesting, and this is how our relationship started, which I'm pretty, mega happy about. But to start right off to the questions, we had sessions yesterday. I followed some discussions. Some of the questions were quite provocative, and I wanted to bring it up today as well to have your opinion. But my first and very question, and someone asked me, like, please ask that, Jon, because I'm mega curious. And the first question is how to land projects with such great brands that you are working with, like Forbes, and you work for HBR and things like that. So how to become contributor if you're a journalist or writer, how to become contributor with that organizations and journals?
I can answer for Forbes in the past, but I can't answer for I'll answer it differently for HBR. It's important to know the personality of each of these journals. So in the case of Forbes, they don't accept submissions. They need to invite you to be a contributor. So you need to work through an interview process that starts with contacting the editor in the area that's important and saying, I'd like to be a contributor. Here are some of the things that I've written. Is that possible? Let me explain what that means if you become a contributor to Forbes, which is, and you'll laugh about this, but it is the way it is. If I write 5 articles a month, I make $250. So that's what, about 200 euros, more or less, a month for 5 articles. Total ripoff. So the question is, why do I do that? And the answer is, it's my way of keeping my brain cells intact. I'm 69. I've retired, and so it's just a pleasure to write. It's an activity, a discipline that I enjoy. Second is, I think that I have something to say, so I continue to write at the 250 for 5 articles. In the case of HBR, I just want to give everybody. Oh, and thank you very much, Bodhizar. I am 69, and I'm quite proud that I've kept my weight down and I go to the gym 5 days a week. But thank you very much. I'm trying very hard to stay around as long as possible, in order to meet Elina sometime for real. So the second thing is, if you think about sort of HBR, what happens in HBR is they work very closely with writers to craft the article together with you. And so what you do for HBR is you send them a proposal, and you may send them 100 words on it, but you're not sending an article for submission. You're sending an idea about an article. The reason I'm mentioning this is that Forbes and HBR are 2 different examples of how different magazines or different journals, virtual or not these days, operate. And you need to understand how each journal operates, because Wired is different than HBR is different than Forbes is different than another, etc. So educate yourself. There's always information on the web about how to become a contributor to any one of these. And then the last thing that I would say, Elina, is you need to know what you have to say. At the end of the day, writing to Forbes and saying, I'd like to be a contributor, what they're going to want to know is, why would we give you our molecules, our electrons, rather than somebody else? And you've got to have you not only need to have an answer to that, but you need to present that answer at the moment when you're applying as a contributor. So you need to figure out what area you want to write in. Is it entrepreneurship? Is it career? Is it leadership? Is it technology? And you've got to think very clearly about why doing this is in Forbes' best interests. Not just your best interest, but Forbes' best interest. It's like a sale no different than any other sale.
Yeah, excellent. I remember that actually you also mentioned that in the case with Forbes, you came to them to say, hey, I'm going to write about freelance economy, and there was no other writer who would cover that, right? That was
exactly. You've got to find a spot that adds value to whatever journal or magazine you want to participate in. The other thing is you should stick with it. I've been writing for Forbes for 3.5 years. It's problematic right now because I used to get 5,000 to 10,000 eyeballs for every article because people were interested. But now Forbes only gives you eyeballs if you're subscribing. So my count has gone from 10,000 to 1 to 2,000 because it only counts subscribers right now. But the benefit of it is, of course, that people read it and share it with other folks. And so you get that stuff anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right. Excellent. You did mention the pay, and that is my next question because we had a discussion, and it's one of the most popular topic. I have to say it was the most attended session on the pricing yesterday. And I've heard someone saying, hey, how do I handle it? I see some requests on LinkedIn and they say I'll pay like just, peanuts for the words or for the blog. And people agree to do that. So how do I maintain my level of, pricing, and what is actually the level? What's your advice? How do you handle it?
I encourage you guys to think in terms of a portfolio. And some of the writing that you're going to do is going to be very low fee because you're doing it not to make money. You're doing it for building a reputation in the marketplace. And then there's some other work that's going to be sort of future focused, and you're starting to build a reputation in a particular area. The cost, the benefit may not be as great to you as areas where you're expert, but there's going to be a part where you want to think about the future, not just the current. And then the third part of the portfolio I would recommend is the sort of the base. And that is working with your clients, providing the writing that is getting you the fee that you think is fair, et cetera, et cetera. When you're thinking about a fee, I want to answer it in a couple of different ways and just tell you some stories. One is you have to know how much you're worth. And I would invite people to consider, do you know how much you're worth? Not how much you hope you're worth, but how much you're worth. That's first. Second, I would encourage you to ask for what you're worth when you're sure of what you're worth. And we used to play a little game in a consulting firm that I was part of. It's many years from now, and please forgive me as I describe it. It sounds a little arrogant, but it actually worked. We used the giggle test. So if you can say the number without giggling, you should ask for it.
Okay.
Think about that for a minute. If you can ask for it without you just started giggling. It's wonderful. It turns out to be unusually accurate. So every year in our consultancy, the partners of the firm, there were 6 partners of our firm, and it was a firm about 100 people, we would actually do this to one another, which is, how much are you going to charge this year? And if you could say it without laughing, the chances were pretty good. Not only you could charge it, but you could get it. But if you were giggling, you knew it was outrageous. That's the same thing. So Luke Guest heard the same thing in the chat. Try it. And by the way, you don't have to try it, Vanessa or Bodazar or anybody else. You don't have to try it like for real yet. Try it in the mirror. Try it with your best friend, etc. And it seems uncannily to work. The last thing that I would say, so the first thing I'm saying is you need to know how much you're worth. Second, that's a process that can help you to figure out how much you're worth. But the third thing is talk to your colleagues. Find out how other people are charging and what they're getting for similar sorts of things. The fourth thing that I would say is that people will pay a premium if you're one of the rare people that really demonstrates expertise in a particular area and can attract readers. My son Josh is a managing director at a large bank, and his area is research. And what he said to his staff was, I'm not interested in you writing a good piece. I'm interested in you writing a good piece that will be read and shared by other people. That's an important distinction. And so part of this is really saying, be really clear about all 4 of those points. Who do you want reading this stuff? What do you bring in terms of expertise? What is it that you think is a fair amount for you to be paid? Using the giggle test, can you actually handle that, et cetera, et cetera? I hope that's a good answer. And from me to hand, yeah, take a shot. See if it works.
Yeah, salary survey. We've got some links also yesterday. So folks, in the document that we shared with everyone, have a look. You may find a few links there. Excellent. That is nicely actually, leads to my other question. And you mentioned portfolio because you have to do different work for your portfolio. And we had an advice yesterday which says that it might be counterproductive to show your portfolio. What do you think?
I didn't understand that. And the reason I didn't understand it is what you want to do is establish a relationship with people that you want a relationship with. Right? So, the challenge here is making sure that you've got that. And one way to do that, of course, is to share the work that you've done and who you've done it with. So I guess it must be that the concern was that if you shared it, people might steal the ideas or something like that. To which my response is, people steal ideas all the time. At the end of the day, the only security you have is your ability to create the next idea, not your ability to protect the ideas that you've already had.
All right, clear enough. Yeah. About ideas, my next question would be about some unethical aspects in writer's job. We had an excellent session yesterday with the speaker who was talking about how to deal unethical requests and what to do if a client is asking to write something which can be harmful for the society or for the health, or maybe not even maybe not the truth that the writer has to convey. How would you handle that if you would get such requests?
You have to start by believing you have a future. People that are willing to forego their future must be panicked and afraid. So I think the first thing to do is to check out the fear first. Is this really a do or die sort of a situation? Are you about to not be able to put food on the table, etc.? And if that's the case, for heaven's sakes, don't throw away your future, but feed your family. I think the second part of that is, and I'll give you a personal experience for me. It goes back to the earlier thing, which is valuing your work. And I'll tell you a quick story. I told Elina this just before we got started. I got a very sweet and nice email from the head of enterprise sales at Upwork, who said, "We love you. We love your work. We think you're fabulous. This is incredible. We really want to partner with you in so many different ways." And I was thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, Upwork, blah, blah, blah. And I waited a month, never heard a thing. So I wrote back and I said, well, apparently this isn't real, but I wanted to thank you for the offer, the invitation. It was nice talking to you. To which they then wrote back, oh, no, this is absolutely real. We want you to do a podcast. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. We're so excited. And I said, what's the compensation arrangement? And there was silence. And they said, we want you to do it for free. It'll be good for your brand. How many of us have heard somebody say, do this one for me because it's good for your brand? And my response to them was, I'm already doing good things for my brand. I already get lots of invitations to do podcasts and sit on panels. I don't understand why you guys, more than anybody else, would take advantage of freelancers like this, because that's what you're doing. And said no. And people went, why did you do that? I mean, wouldn't you benefit from the publicity? And I said, I might a little, but the misgivings would hurt me more than any benefit from the publicity. And I don't like to be used. I don't like to be exploited, and this felt exploitative. So I think there's two parts to this. One of course is don't do anything that's going to harm your future. And if you're thinking about doing something that harms your future, for heaven's sakes, find a friend and get your friend to give you some advice, or at least talk it through before you do that. And the second thing is, sometimes it's not about the future. Sometimes somebody asks you to do something that you just think is exploitative of you rather than unethical. Don't allow yourself to be exploited.
Absolutely right. I love how you put it. And Philippe is writing in the chat to me directly. Philippe, you can put it in the comment chat that it's because we're called freelancers doesn't mean we work for free, right?
Exactly. Exactly. By the way, does everybody know this is a part of the thing that's happening as we're writing this book for the survey stuff that many of you may be part of, is that I went into the history of freelancing. It turns out freelancing, our job as freelancers goes back to the 3rd century BC, when Rome hired independent contractors to build buildings, to design and build their buildings. I love that. I absolutely love that. So, we're historical.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And you mentioned survey. Thanks a lot. I did want to mention that at the beginning. Božidar, if you could drop the link in the survey. This is something that's ongoing right now, and Freelance Business is sponsoring the survey as well. And the purpose is to actually evaluate what makes a freelancer successful, right?
It's really the experience. Exactly. It's the experience of freelancing. And we've had lots of stuff from the US, the independence thing with MBO Partners and Upwork's Freelancing in America. We never had a global study. So it's fantastic to say we have 75 platforms, social networks, and agencies that are participating in every part of the world. So we're sort of taking it, even though I'm from the States, we're taking it back from a US perspective and trying to offer a global perspective, which I'm so pleased with.
Yeah, and it's awesome initiative. I really can't wait to see results, because it's indeed the first one which runs globally. So that's totally awesome. All right. Well, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I have a lot of them, so I can continue, but I do want to give you a question as well. So John, my next one is, do you work with contracts or not? Like, if a small assignment comes, do you take it without a contract, or you always sign a contract?
I used to pride myself on a handshake thing. I used to feel very good about that. I think the handshake era is over, and I'll tell you why I think the handshake era is over. One is, memories are faulty, and so it's really easy, if there's no contract, if there's no paper to say this is what we agreed to, for somebody to forget what they were going to pay you, forget what the deadline was, etc., etc. So simply for honesty's sake, for transparency's sake, I think it's important to have a contract. I would add one other piece, and that is, I think the act of contracting is more important than the contract, because it's the process of talking through the project, even if it's a brief project. It's an agreement on the statement of work, it's an agreement on the outcomes, it's an agreement on the schedule, it's an agreement on the price. I think that's the key. Julie just sent a little note that said, sometimes people say you're free tomorrow, and I guess the implication of that is, should you jump at whatever assignment is offered? I think it depends on the assignment. I think there's some really cool assignments that come up when people say, I just thought of this, I've got to get it done, it's urgent, can you handle it? And it's just the coolest work in the world. So great. But if it feels like they are dismissive of you, or not respectful of what you bring to the party, or asking you to do something crazy or irresponsible or just very, very difficult, well, then you got to make your decision. And one of the questions is, are you willing to charge a premium for stuff like that? Are you willing to say, I've got to drop some other things, so I'm happy to do this and meet your need, but I'm missing X income for that, so I need to charge you accordingly. And to be clear about that, freelancing ain't free.
It's actually excellent, and I do follow that also. Like, if I feel the customer is difficult, the price goes up. Because I know he will just jam me every single day. But okay, if he pays, I'm happy. Okay, cool. How do you deal with difficult customers, by the way? If you have any of them.
Sure. And I'd ask people, how many clients have you fired? If you haven't fired a client in the last 2 years, it means you are either very lucky, very good at contracting, or accepting too much guff. So what I would say to you is, in the area of how do you deal with a difficult customer, I think the first thing to remember is we're not slaves, we can leave. Right? The whole point of being a freelancer is so we can leave if we need to. Second, I think that you've got to understand what kind of difficult client it is. So one kind of difficult client is just slow. It takes forever for them to follow up, give you what you need, etc., etc. And with them, the message is clear. I mean, which is we need a clear schedule. You need to conform to it, or I can't do my work. In the case of an argumentative client, you might want to do something different. In the case of an arrogant client who's second guessing everything you're doing and sitting in, on top of your shoulder, saying, "Not that this, that's something else." And the last is, you can imagine a bully client that needs to reinforce his or her own self-esteem by making you smaller. In all of those, I encourage you to remember that you're a freelancer. In all of those, I encourage you to fire a client that you think you can't work with. But before you fire the client, you need to give them one or two warning shots, so to speak, which is to say, I'm having a great deal of difficulty working for this reason. Third thing, one of the things that I encourage you to put in place in any of your contracts is the expectation of two-way feedback. Part of the problem in dealing with difficult clients is that we may not feel as though we have an opportunity to give them feedback without creating a problem. Well, one way to deal with that is to just agree that every 2 weeks or every week or whatever the time frame is, we will talk for a half an hour about how it's going. If you have a very small project, that's a different thing than a very large or long project. But in any of these cases, I encourage you to put in place some process of feedback on a regular basis with each client so that you don't have to explode to get their attention, but rather in the course of doing things that you can manage the problems, the difficulty in a more professional way. And then if you can't, get another client.
This is excellent advice. I really, really loved it. We actually got also a checklist from, not a checklist, a kind of intro document from Astrid yesterday, and it's in that Wikipedia document I mentioned many times. So do check that, guys, and you can download it and use it for yourself as well. So you have a proper communication with your customer. There is one question from Philippe, which I love a lot.
Sure.
There's actually lots of questions in one, but basically, what's your creative process when you start writing? How does it come?
Oh, man. It's a wonderful question. I wish I had a creative process. I don't know that I do. But what I would do is, if you haven't seen it, and I sent it to Elina, and maybe you'll share or whatever. One of my favorites is Pixar has this sort of 22 maxims or 22 things that you need to consider when you're writing a story. And I would look it up. Go on the internet, look at Pixar's 22 rules for storytelling. It's very helpful. At the end of the day, what I try to do, just personally, is to have a mix. So if you were to read my stuff on Forbes, what you'd find is that sometimes they're profiles of interesting startups. Sometimes they're analyses of different areas of freelancing, like interim management or writing. Recently was an article, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes I'm writing about the CEO, what I call CEO surveys, the views of people like Elina and others, and many of you, in dealing with different areas of freelancing. How do you help new freelancers to be successful? And sometimes I just write clickbait, stuff that I know will generate clicks, because every once in a while you want to provide something to people, in my case in Forbes, that doesn't require a lot of brain cells to work through. It's just easy, simple, and kind of fun. And so the most recent one was, what are the best places for freelance nomads? And it's kind of silly, but people are interested. And I'm always looking for other series types of articles. So a new one that Elina and I are working on together, as one example, is Freelance Voices. So yesterday I published Freelance Voices from Argentina. Soon we'll do a Freelance Voices from Belgium, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do one from the UK, et cetera. So I'm really trying to create a variety of things that attract readers in my stuff, because people are going to be bored if I just do the same thing over and over and over again. I don't know if that answers the creative process stuff, but it's what I do.
I hope it answers your question. Manusha is asking, it's getting very competitive, and I know the industry that we're in, lots and lots of competition, even more now with the COVID. How freelancers can prepare for this, and what's your advice for those who are in that?
I've got 2 or 3 bits of advice. One bit of advice is that some of our work is going to be outsourced to tech. More and more of the sort of the simple writing stuff will be AI produced. We know that. We just know that. So I think it's kind of like physicians realized at some point that they had to leave X-rays and move to the next technology, and it's the same here. We're not going to make a lot of, none of us are going to make a lot of money writing 50 to 100 word blurbs that can be produced by machine. So we've got to step up, and I think the challenge for all of us is to become known for something that people are interested in. I mean, the essence of at the end of the day, the challenge of any writer is to be known for a body of work that is of interest to a marketplace, to a population. And if you're not known for a body of work, if you're a generalist and do a little bit of everything, my advice is it's going to be tougher and tougher. So I think the challenge is what is your expertise? What's the thing that really distinguishes you from everyone else? Because ultimately that's the source of success over time as competition increases. I wish there was an easier answer, but at the end of the day, I would like to give you one other piece, and I know we're going to leave her in a second, but one other piece. My friend Tal Shmuley, is an Israeli fellow, created something at LinkedIn when he was there called that Personal Hackathon. I love that. So he gets together 3 or 4 people that he trusts, respects, that know him. And what he does each year is he gets some feedback from them. How am I doing in this? You've read my writing. What do you think about my writing? Am I expanding? Am I growing? Am I getting better? This has been my business this year. Do you think I've done everything right? Do I need to do things differently, etc.? And over the course of a couple of hours, I recommend beer or wine or hard liquor. It's always better to be lubricated when you do this. But he and others get real value out of that feedback from people whom they trust and who think and who want the best for them. Try it.